So my name's David Dawson and I'm the founder of Cosy Thame. So last winter, around the November-December time, we flew a thermal imaging drone over some of the streets in Thame. And we also borrowed a thermal imaging stills camera from South Oxfordshire District Council in order to look at people's homes and see where they were leaking heat. And this evening we're going to be showing the videos and showing the still images back to people, and then pointing out what the common issues are that people have in their homes when they're losing heat.
We also did Rapids Fitness Club and the lead court as well. So this is the roof of Rapids, which looks good. The reason is they didn't have much heating on that day anyway. This is big court, so straight away you can see where they're losing heat. To show you can't have that energy, isn't it?
Well, I think generally in the UK, it's known that our housing stock loses heat 3 times more than housing stock in Germany or in Norway, for example. There's a chart, well-known chart, that it shows over a 5-hour period, homes in Germany typically lose 1 degree of heat, ours lose 3 degrees of heat. We've got a very ageing housing stock. Here in Thame we've got a very mixed housing stock, some housing stock built in the 70s when building standards were pretty ropey, unfortunately. So listed buildings really do present a difficulty for the owner, because they have to make sure that any changes, any modifications that they make, such as replacing the windows with proper thermally insulated windows with thermally insulated glass, meet the needs of making sure that that listed building isn't disturbed or changed in any way. And that can end up being quite expensive. And then, of course, typically those buildings haven't got cavity walls. Well, they just generally haven't. So and typically 35% of a building's heat is lost through the walls. So cavity wall insulation really makes a difference. But it's really tricky if you've got a listed building. There is some. In Oxfordshire, fortunately, the county has set up some grant schemes, and if people go to Oxfordshire County Council website and look for help with their homes, they'll be able to find schemes that are currently running, such as being able to get extra insulation. Most of the schemes now are focused on those houses which haven't got gas boilers, because the emphasis is now on those with oil fired, because we're trying to phase out oil fired heating as quickly as possible. So that's the priority. There's also the national government scheme, which is to replace boilers with ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps. And coming in April, we still don't know much about it, but there's a new scheme that they've announced, but without much detail so far, which is called Eco Plus. And they're promising that that's going to be available to a wider group of people than those currently. Those that can get national government grants have to be on a very low income and really in fuel poverty before they can get help. But this Eco Plus scheme, they're saying, should be available to a wider group of people. Of course not. Of course not. Fingers crossed, that's all I can say. What I would say is that people can do things for themselves in the meantime. Thermally insulated curtains can make a significant difference if people fit them at their windows and close them, obviously, when night falls. And what we did notice in Thame, that people were closing their curtains downstairs, but not necessarily doing it upstairs. And heat rises, of course, so they're losing heat out of those. Draft excluders are really important. In Thame, we got our sewing circle, which is called a stitch in Thame, to make nearly over 150 draft excluders, which were given out via Citizens Advice and through the Red Kite Family Centre to people on low incomes who were in need of them. But making a draft excluder, I discovered, is actually surprisingly easy, and it's well worth doing, and it makes a difference. The other thing that we noticed with the thermal imaging camera was hot spots on walls, typically underneath windows, and those are where the radiator underneath the window is heating the outside world. What you can do is go to one of the building supply firms and you can buy a roll of silver, padded silver foil, which costs about £20, and cut it and stick it behind all your radiators. And that makes quite a difference, and it means that you're heating your room rather than the street. Good question, I don't know. But I do know that new housing in Thame is being built to the current building regulations and current building standards. Whether they've still got conventional boilers in them, I don't know. I would suspect that they have at the moment. It would be good to see more heat pumps going in. But the key thing to remember, people must remember about heat pumps, is that they put out less heat. So you need to first of all make sure that your home is properly insulated, because otherwise it's just going to cost you more in electricity because you're going to have to run the heat pump for longer. Well, some of them are ahead of us. I mean, Oxford is certainly ahead of us on this, and South Oxfordshire District Council has got 2 thermal imaging cameras which they loan out, and we borrowed one of those. We're hoping to be able to get one for Thame for next winter, so that residents here will be able to do their own surveys. But yes, other towns have been interested. I ended up being contacted by Falmouth Town Council down in Cornwall. They heard about what we were doing on BBC website and invited me to go down and talk to them because they were interested in doing precisely this. And it was fascinating actually going down in Cornwall because they've got completely other issues and other benefits as well. I hadn't realised that Cornwall has got quite a supply of geothermal energy there. And they've just secured a £2 million grant to be able to set up a geothermal scheme that will heat an entire housing estate outside Falmouth. So there are places around the country which are doing things, and if you like, it's kind of grassroots, and the more people that do this, obviously the better.